Why did she even come back to a war that no one remembered how to win? The helicopter thundered above the peaks, slicing through a sky the color of bruised steel. Dust spiraled in the thin mountain air, turning the landing zone into a whirling storm of sand and sound. When the Chinook's wheels kissed the steel-plated pad of forward operating base Kestrel, every head turned. A new arrival, a stranger stepping into their cold, cruel little world. Sergeant Anna Sharma dropped down from the open belly, her boots thudding softly against the metal. The wind tore at her uniform, clawed at her face. She squinted into it and didn't move. One hand steadied the long, fabric-wrapped rifle case slung over her shoulder. The other held a duffel battered, silent like her. Around her, the base moved with that half-dead rhythm of people who'd been deployed too long. Men and women in dusty, multicam walked with the gait of endurance, their expressions all the same, tired, wary, unimpressed. They looked at her like they were looking at an empty chair after a funeral, a replacement for someone who mattered. They noticed the lack of patches on her sleeves, no insignia of elite units, no special forces tabs, just plain cloth, just a face without a name. That was her curse, anonymity. It followed her like a shadow. Inside the headquarters tent, the air was thick and stale, a cocktail of sweat, diesel, and stale coffee. The hum of electronics drowned out the silence between the conversations. Maps plastered the plywood walls, red markers clustered like bloodstains on an endless range of ridges and valleys. A group of soldiers laughed at the map table, their camaraderie sharp-edged and territorial. They noticed her the second she entered, the new one, the outsider. One of them, a corporal with a lopsided grin and the confidence of someone who hadn't been proven wrong yet, broke from the group. His name tape read Riley. He looked her up and down, his smirk thin. "You the new long gun." The tone wasn't a question, it was an accusation. "Sergeant Sharma," she replied evenly. "Right," he said, "I'm Riley, your spotter." No handshake, no welcome, just a look that said he already knew how the story would end. His gaze dropped to her hands. She was peeling off her flight gloves beneath them, a pair of shooting gloves. Tan leather, stained dark from years of oil and sweat. The knuckles were cracked, the seams worn pale, and over her right index finger, a small tear revealed a sliver of skin. Riley chuckled. "They issue those at basic now, or you dig M out of a surplus bin." The other soldiers snickered, a low, safe kind of laughter. A bigger man by the map table, Specialist Davies, grinned. Maybe she spent all her gear money on hair gel. Their laughter filled the tent like static. Sharma said nothing. She didn't flinch, didn't scowl. She just stood there, letting the noise wash over her like wind over stone. Then her eyes drifted toward the back of the tent, where a tall figure watched her from behind a bank of monitors. Major Kalen Vance, commanding officer of Razorback Company. He didn't look amused, but his displeasure wasn't aimed at his men, it was at her. Vance believed in pedigree, soldiers born from Ranger battalions, bred in Special Forces bloodlines. He trusted reputation, not silence. And Anna Sharma was an anomaly. Her file was thin, standard schools, unremarkable posts, no ribbons that made other men listen. He approached, boots silent against the packed dirt. "Sergeant Sharma," he said, his voice like the mountain air, sharp, thin, unforgiving. "You're replacing Sergeant Foster." It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." Foster had been Riley's shooter, a legend here. The man who once took a record shot in these same mountains. Sharma was his replacement, and everyone knew replacements rarely lasted long. Vance's gaze slid down to her torn glove, his lips pressed into a hard line. "Your equipment is serviceable." "It's functional, sir." "Functional," he repeated, letting the word drip with disdain. "Corporal Riley holds the record for the longest confirmed spot in this AO, 2,430 yards. His previous shooter was one of the best I've ever seen. "The bar is high, Sergeant. I hope you didn't come here to learn on the job." The insult landed like a slap, public, deliberate, but Sharma didn't react. "I'm here to do my job, sir." Vance studied her for a beat longer, then turned away. "We'll see." And just like that, he dismissed her. When he left, the room fell silent. The laughter evaporated. Riley smirked once more, a victory grin before turning back to his friends. She was alone again, standing in the center of a place that already decided she didn't belong. Sharma looked down at her gloves. The torn leather flexed as she moved her fingers, old scars bending with them. They weren't a flaw. They were history, a memory of another place, another mountain. The mockery around her meant nothing. Noise could be understood. And the wind could be mastered. She picked up her rifle case, slung it over her shoulder, and walked out. The real work hadn't begun yet. The briefing room was suffocating, a plywood box soaked in the cold white glare of fluorescent tubes. A satellite image of a valley filled the projector screen, jagged, endless, hostile. The Zaros Valley. The kind of place where people disappeared, and the wind buried the evidence. Major Vance stood at the front, laser pointer in hand, his voice hard and rehearsed. "Operation Silent Apex is a go for 400 tomorrow. Intel confirms a high-level meeting between Insurgent Commander Okafrani and a foreign arms dealer. The dealer's bringing man-portable air defense systems, technology that could shift the balance of power in this sector." A murmur rippled through the room. Everyone knew what that meant. If those weapons reached enemy hands, their air support would be grounded, the mountains lost forever. "The meeting point," Vance continued, circling the map, "is here, designated target area Vulture. Open plateau, exposed, clear lines of sight in every direction. They believe it keeps them safe." He clicked the pointer. 2 red marks glowed on opposite ridges. "Ghost 1 and Ghost 2 will be our Overwatch teams. Ghost 1, Sergeant Miller and Corporal Hayes, take the primary position here, East Ridge, 2,200 yards to target. Textbook. Good cover, clear egress." The Golden Boys, the best gear, the best reputation, Riley's old friends. "Ghost 2, Vance said, his tone changing, heavier, deliberate, will take the secondary position. Western Ridge, it's less ideal." He pointed to a jagged cliff, a sheer exposed edge of rock. "Range to target, 2,800 to 3,000 yards. Wind conditions are chaotic. The Devil's Bellows runs straight through here, unpredictable crosswinds. This is a contingency position, last resort." He didn't need to look at her, but he did. "Ghost 2 will be Sergeant Sharma and Corporal Riley." Riley stiffened beside her. It was an insult dressed as an order, the impossible ridge, the impossible range. They were the disposable team. "With all due respect, sir," Riley started, trying to control his voice, "that range with those winds, nobody making that shot. Foster and I tried it last rotation, it's impossible." "Are you questioning my orders, Corporal?" "No, sir, You'll go where you're told." Then Vance turned his gaze on Sharma. "Sergeant, your file is concise. No long-range qualifications listed. For my peace of mind, and the peace of mind of the man whose life will depend on you, what's the longest confirmed engagement you've ever made?" The room went still. All eyes turned. This was the test, the moment of humiliation they were waiting for. Sharma didn't flinch. Her hands rested calmly on the table, the torn glove visible under the harsh light. She looked at the map, not at him. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, controlled. "Sufficient for the task, sir." The silence afterward was heavy, then disbelief rippled through the room like static. Riley scoffed. Vance's jaw tightened. "Sufficient," he repeated, each syllable deliberate. "You understand, Sergeant, in this valley, sufficient means hitting a moving target a mile and a half away, in a 40-mile-an-hour crosswind. while your bullet spends 5 seconds in the air. That's what sufficient means here. Her gaze never left the map. Yes, sir. Vance's composure snapped. He turned away, addressing the room. Ghost 1 is primary. Their word is law. Ghost 2 is for observation only. You will not engage unless Ghost 1 is compromised and you are given direct orders by me. Is that clear, Sergeant? Crystal, sir. The briefing ended. As the room emptied, Riley walked beside her, his voice low and venomous. What the hell was that? Sufficient for the task. Are you trying to get us killed or just make me look like an idiot? Neither, she said, not slowing her pace. Look, I don't know what unit you crawled out of, but this isn't a training ground. You embarrassed us in there. You embarrassed me. She stopped, turned. Her eyes met his calm, cold, precise. Your job is to call the wind, she said, and mine is to make it irrelevant. Then she turned away, leaving him standing in the dust of his own doubt. Outside, the wind tore through the camp again, dry, relentless, alive. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling it brush against her torn gloves, her face, her silence. Somewhere deep down, she smiled. The mountain was already speaking. She just had to listen. How far would you climb for a mission you already knew was meant to fail? The night swallowed the mountains whole. No moon, no horizon, just black upon black, the kind of darkness that didn't just hide things, it tested you. Sergeant Anna Sharma led the ascent in silence. The air was so thin it sliced the lungs like glass. Every breath burned, every step came with the weight of a mile of stone beneath her boots. She moved like she'd done this 1,000 times, not fast, not slow, but measured, deliberate. Her pack heavy with glass and steel, her rifle case slung like an extension of her spine. Behind her, Corporal Riley climbed in ragged rhythm, his breathing harsh in her earpiece. The cold had crawled past his gloves, biting at his knuckles. His heart pounded against the plate of his vest. He'd done high-altitude ops before, but this one felt different. Off balance. Wrong. Maybe it was the silence. Even the mountain seemed to be holding its breath. The route to the western ridge was a labyrinth of scree slopes and knife-edged ridgelines that offered no mercy. Every footstep had to be placed with care. One slip meant 1,000-foot fall into the Devil's Bellows. The radio crackled faintly with TOC check-ins, distant voices distorted by the wind. Above them, stars glittered like cold embers. It was beautiful in a cruel kind of way, a beauty that didn't care whether you lived or died. Riley cursed under his breath as his boots slid on loose shale. Sharma turned her head slightly, the faint green glow of her NVGs catching his face. "You good?" she asked quietly. "Yeah," he grunted, "just rocks are loose." "They always are." She kept moving. He hated how calm she sounded, like none of this touched her, like she was made of the same granite they were climbing. By the time they reached the ledge, dawn was still a rumor beyond the horizon. The ridge wasn't much of a position, barely wide enough for both of them to lie flat. The drop ahead was pure abyss. Below them, the valley sprawled in endless folds of shadow and fog. "Hell of a view," Riley muttered, breath fogging his optics. Sharma didn't reply. She was already unpacking, her movements precise, ritualistic. She laid down the rifle, extended the bipod, adjusted the cheek rest, attached the suppressor. Every click was deliberate, nothing wasted, nothing hurried. Riley unfolded his spotting scope beside her. His hands shook slightly, from cold or nerves he couldn't tell. He lazed the target plateau, a gray smudge nearly 3 kilometers away. The rangefinder blinked its answer. 2,950 yards, he said. His voice was tight, almost 3 clicks. Sharma nodded once, quietly scribbling the number on a laminated data card strapped to her wrist. Her handwriting was tiny, surgical. He noticed her glove again, the tear on the finger, that same mark that had become a quiet obsession in his mind. It didn't look accidental anymore. It looked deliberate, like she kept it that way for a reason. They settled into the position, the wind already gnawing at their hides. The Devil's Bellows. He'd read about it in the mission brief, a convergence of canyons that created violent, shifting air currents, wind that moved like a living thing. No pattern, no mercy. At first light, the world emerged in bruised colors. The peaks burned gold at their tips while the valley below remained locked in shadow. The wind howled through the ravine like a scream that had lost its voice. "This is a waste of time," Riley muttered, eyes pressed to the scope. "Mirage is dancing like water, can't even read the dust." Sharma didn't answer. She was watching not through glass but through eyes that had seen this before. Her gaze roamed the valley floor, the distant plateau, the cliffs that framed the meet point. She watched the shrubs sway, the fog twist, the faint shimmer of the air. Riley exhaled sharply. "Ghost One's got the clean angle. We're sitting on a death trap. Vance sent us up here to fail." Sharma's voice came quiet through the wind. "Failure only happens when you stop learning." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means wind can't be beaten, only understood." He didn't reply. He just went back to scanning, muttering under his breath. He didn't realize yet that she wasn't talking about wind. She was talking about life. Hours passed. The radio hissed with periodic updates from Ghost One. Calm, efficient, confident voices. Miller and Hayes, the base's golden duo. Every word from them was met with faint smiles back at TOC. They were the favorites. Sharma and Riley were background noise. And yet, in the silence between transmissions, Riley found himself listening more to the sound of her steady breathing beside him. It was like a metronome in chaos. He hated that it made him feel safe. Then around noon, the sky changed. Clouds rolled in low, fast, dark. Thunder rippled through the peaks like distant artillery. The wind grew teeth. "Storm's coming," Riley said, checking his kestrel meter. "Pressure's dropping hard." Sharma looked up at the sky. "We'll ride it." "Ride it," he scoffed. "If that front hits us full, comms are toast. Ghost One'll be blind, we'll be." The sky flashed white. The thunder that followed wasn't sound, it was violence. It struck somewhere near the east ridge. The whole mountain seemed to shudder. Sparks erupted from Riley's comms unit, filling the air with the acrid scent of burning plastic. "Comms down," he shouted, slapping the side of the radio. "Main unit's fried." Sharma reached for her backup, a small personal transceiver. She toggled frequencies, static hissing like an angry serpent. Then, faint, distorted, a voice bled through. "Ost 1 hit, visibility 0, can't see." Then nothing. "They're blind," Riley said. "The storms hit them head-on. They've lost eyes on the target." She didn't react. Her hands moved calmly across her gear, checking each latch, tightening each strap. Riley tried the backup channel again. Static, dead air. "Mission scrubbed," he said. "We've got no comms, no orders." "Then we hold," she said. "Hold for what? The storm's grounding everything, we're just—" But he stopped, because through his scope he saw headlights. Two vehicles bounced across the plateau, technicals with mounted guns. Dust plumed behind them, swallowed by the wind. Then a third vehicle appeared, black SUV, armored, expensive. "Contacts on the deck," he whispered. "Multiple insurgents dismounting, that's them, Okafrani's convoy." She adjusted her scope slightly, watching. "3 men getting out of the SUV," Riley continued. "One matches Okafrani's build, the other 2 Westerners, could be the arms dealers." One of the men opened a case. Inside, sleek metal, unmistakable, a man-portable missile launcher. Riley's blood turned to ice. "Jesus, they've got manpads, confirmed." The radio remained dead. Ghost One was blind, TOC was deaf, and the storm had sealed every line of command. The chain had snapped. "We can't do anything," Riley said, panic creeping into his voice. "No authorization, no comms, and this wind, nobody can make that shot. Not even." Sharma didn't move, didn't speak. She was studying the valley, watching the dust swirl, the tiny, invisible stories written in the wind. Her face was calm, too calm. Riley stared at her, incredulous. "You're not thinking about taking the shot." "Still nothing." "You can't be serious. 3,000 yards in this wind, that's suicide, you'd miss by a mile." She finally turned her head, eyes meeting his through the faint glow of the storm. Her voice came quiet, even, but it cut through him like a blade. "I didn't come here to watch." Then she began to move. She unclipped a small, battered wind meter, the kind issued a decade ago. No digital readout, no fancy interface, just spinning metal and instinct. She held it up, felt the gusts whip across her hand. Then again higher, then to her left, to her right, mapping something invisible. Riley blinked. A single point reading is useless. The wind changes every 100 yards. She ignored him. Her eyes weren't on the meter anymore, they were on the valley. The way the mirage shimmered off the rock. The way dust twisted around invisible currents. The rhythm of it, the pulse. Her mind was working in layers, pressure, distance, density, direction. A kind of quiet math that couldn't be taught. It could only be felt. Riley just watched, unable to interrupt. Something in the air around her had changed. The storm howled, but she seemed apart from it, like the chaos bent around her stillness. Finally, she picked up her rifle. The metal looked ancient beside the high-tech gear they carried. A scarred Accuracy International AXMC, its stock scratched and paint worn thin. She laid it prone, adjusted her cheek rest, and began to dial her scope. Click, click, click. "Range 2950, Riley said automatically, his training kicking in despite himself. She nodded, more clicks, elevation, windage, more adjustments than he thought possible. "What's your hold?" he asked. "I'm not holding," she murmured. "I've dialed it." Her gloved hand settled on the trigger guard. The torn leather flexed soft, worn, alive. She exhaled slowly. Riley could barely breathe. The wind was still howling. The distance insane. Every textbook, every rule said don't shoot. But some part of him, some small, irrational part, wanted to see what she'd do. Through his scope, he called the scene like it was training. Primary target, Okafrani. Wind 25, gusting to 30. Full value 230, on your command. She didn't answer, she just waited. Seconds stretched, then suddenly a lull. He saw it in the dust first, a pause. Her finger moved. The rifle cracked. The sound vanished instantly into the wind. The bullet sailed into the valley, invisible, graceful, absurd. 5 seconds of silence. Then a puff of stone dust. 6 inches from Okafrani's head. Riley froze. That wasn't a miss. It was a warning. Who fires a warning shot from 3,000 yards away? For a few seconds, neither of them breathed. The valley held its own breath too, as if stunned by the audacity of it. Through his spotting scope, Riley saw the dust settle near Okafrani's head, 6 inches off, 6, at almost 3 kilometers. It wasn't luck, it was language, the way she spoke to the wind. "What was that?" he stammered. You missed on purpose." Sharma's cheek stayed pressed against the stock. Her eye never left the scope. "Ranging shot," she said softly, adjusting. Riley blinked, brain fighting to catch up. "At this distance, that's not how." "Call the next target," she interrupted. Calm, icy, absolute. He swallowed. "Copy. Secondary HVI left of the SUV. Arms dealer. Wind same direction. Range confirmed." Her gloved fingers moved again, 3 clicks up, 1 click right. Click, 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 each one deliberate, almost musical. Then she fired. The rifle cracked once more, the recoil rippling through her body like a heartbeat. The sound was gone before it could echo. 5 seconds of eternity later, Riley saw the result, the second man collapsing backward, a spray of red mist painting the desert air. "Impact," he shouted, voice cracking. Target down, target down. His words vanished into the storm. He realized he was trembling. The impossible had just happened in front of him, and it was real. On the plateau, chaos erupted. Insurgents scattered for cover, firing wildly into the canyons. The second Western Arms dealer froze, torn between flight and disbelief. Okafrani dove behind the SUV. Riley's eyes darted back to Sharma. She hadn't moved. She was reloading, methodical, unhurried, her face calm as still water. The third HVI bolted, sprinting across open ground toward the ravine. Third target on the run, Riley shouted, heading northwest, moving fast. He scanned the terrain, heart pounding. You can't, he's moving, Anna, he's moving. I see him. Her voice had changed, quieter but sharper, honed down to a single, surgical point. Riley's kestrel was flickering madly in his hand. Wind shift, left to right, full value, 28 miles per hour at 9 o'clock. I see it, she said again. She tracked him, following his motion across the plateau. The man ran in a broken rhythm, half-crouched, zigzagging, the ravine 30 yards away. Riley could barely keep up through the scope. His pulse was hammering in his ears. Wind's changing again. It's. She didn't wait for him to finish. She was already inside the moment. She'd been watching for the lull, that tiny flicker of stillness between gusts, the pocket of calm that only lasted a breath. She exhaled, half a breath then. The rifle cracked. The sound vanished into the void. 5.5 seconds later, the runner collapsed mid-stride, legs folding beneath him. His body tumbled forward, momentum carrying him over the ravine's edge and into the shadows below. Gone. Silence. On the plateau, the survivors broke. Vehicles roared to life, tires screaming across the rock. They fled into the dust, leaving behind their dead and their deal. Riley's hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped his scope. His voice was a whisper, almost reverent. 3 shots. He swallowed, 3,000 yards in a hurricane. He turned to her. How the hell did you do that? Sharma pulled back from the rifle, ejected the final casing and began clearing her chamber. Her breathing never changed. Her eyes were still and far away. Read the wind, she said simply. That's not reading, that's witchcraft. But she didn't answer. She was already logging her shots, scribbling quiet notes in a grease pencil on her dope card, numbers, corrections, small, cryptic symbols that only made sense to her. For a moment, Riley just watched her, the torn gloves, the scars on her knuckles, the calm precision of every motion. She didn't look triumphant. She didn't even look proud. She looked at peace. He realized she hadn't come here to prove anything. She came here to remember who she was. Back at Forward Operating Base Kestrel, the world was falling apart. Major Vance paced in the TOC, his face drawn tight, the storm still hammering the canvas roof above them. The comms were down across the sector. Ghost One had gone dark after reporting zero visibility. The operation was dead, his perfect textbook mission drowned by weather. He hated the helplessness, hated the waiting, hated the woman he'd sent to the worthless ridge. Still nothing from Ghost One, he barked. A young airman at the radio station shook his head. Negative, sir. Storms blocking everything above short-range frequency. Vance's jaw flexed, and Ghost too. Offline, sir. Lightning strike fried their primary unit. Figures, he muttered. That position was a joke anyway. Shouldn't have wasted a team there. He didn't say her name, but everyone in the room knew who he meant. Sergeant Sharma, the quiet woman with the broken gloves and the broken file, the one he'd sent to fail. He leaned over the map, tracing the ridgelines with a finger, voice low and bitter. She wasn't ready for this. I told command she's not trained for long-range work. That's what happens when. Static cut him off. The radio crackled, faint but clear. A voice broke through, breathless, urgent. Spectre TOC, "This is Ghost One, do you copy?" Vance lunged for the handset. "Ghost One, this is TOC. We read you faint but clear. Status report." "Sir, storms breaking over our position. Visibility returning. We've got movement at target area Vulture." Vance froze. "The HVIs, did they abort the meet?" A pause, the sound of wind. Then the spotter's voice again, confused, disbelieving. "Negative, sir. The targets are down." "What?" "3 confirmed EKIA. Okafrani and 2 unidentified Westerners, all neutralized." Vance's blood went cold. "Repeat that, Ghost One. You did not engage. You didn't have authorization." "Negative, sir. We haven't fired a shot. We just got visuals, but they're down, all 3. The entire TOC fell silent. The storm outside seemed to quiet just enough for the disbelief to settle. Vance stared at the radio as if it had just spoken a lie. If Ghost One didn't fire, then who did? There were no drones in the air, no secondary teams, no Overwatch besides. "Sir," the young airman shouted, picking up a weak short-range transmission, "looks like Ghost Two's backup channel." The room leaned in. The speaker hissed, sputtered, then came alive with a trembling voice. "Spectre, this is Ghost 2. Targets neutralized. Repeat, all 3 HVIs down. Range 3,000 yards. Can't believe it." It was Corporal Riley. The voice cracked through static, filled with shock. "Sir, it was her. It was Kali." The name hit the room like a bomb. "Kali." Vance froze, the blood draining from his face. The analysts looked at one another, wide-eyed. Kali wasn't a person you talked about out loud. Kali was a myth, a ghost story traded between operators in dim hangars and late-night briefings. A name scrawled in classified reports with half the sentences blacked out. A sniper who'd made shots that defied geometry, who could read wind like it was sheet music. A ghost who'd gone dark 3 years ago. No unit, no records, just whispers. Vance's throat was dry. He looked down at the roster in front of him, at the simple name printed there. Sharma, Anna, Sergeant. No commendations, no citations, no record of special schools. It was a perfect lie. He remembered her calm eyes, her infuriating composure, the way she'd said sufficient for the task. He hadn't understood it then, he did now. She hadn't been evasive. She'd been honest in the only language that mattered. The Chinook came back at dusk. Its blades chopped the thin air, throwing long shadows across the landing zone. The storm had passed, leaving the sky raw and clear, the kind of cold that made sound carry for miles. When the ramp dropped, the usual chatter of the ground crew died. The noise faded into a hush. 2 figures walked down, one steady, one slower. Riley carried both packs, her rifle case slung carefully in his hands like something sacred. His face was gray with exhaustion, but his eyes had changed. He wasn't looking at her with skepticism anymore. He was looking at her the way soldiers look at legends they'll never equal. Around the helipad, whispers spread like sparks. The impossible shots, the ghost call sign, the woman with the torn gloves. Specialist Davies, the one who joked about her hair gel, stood by the hangar, eyes down. Shame burned in his face. Sharma didn't look at them, didn't look at anyone. She just walked, quiet, boots crunching against the steel. Her expression was unreadable. The weight of what she'd done hadn't landed yet, or maybe it never would. Major Vance waited outside the debriefing tent. No entourage, no clipboard, just him. As they approached, he studied her, the dust on her uniform, the dried mud on her boots, the calm in her eyes. And those gloves, torn, worn, stubbornly defiant against everything that had mocked them. "Sergeant Sharma," he said finally. His voice was stripped of pride. "Corporal Riley." They both stopped. "Report to my office for debrief in 1 hour." He hesitated a beat too long before adding, "Good work out there." It wasn't praise. It wasn't even apology. It was recognition. The kind that carries weight. The kind that only comes once you've seen the impossible with your own eyes. He turned and walked away, leaving them in the settling dusk. Riley glanced at her. He knows, he said quietly, about who you really are. She didn't look at him, didn't need to. Doesn't matter, she said. Then she kept walking. That night in the barracks tent, she began the ritual, the one that never changed. She disassembled her rifle on a small mat, bolt, scope, barrel, each part placed with the precision of a surgeon. The smell of solvent filled the air, sharp and clean. Outside, the wind whispered along the canvas. Riley appeared at the doorway, holding something in his hands. His voice was quiet, awkward. "Sergeant, got you something." He stepped closer and offered it, a new pair of shooting gloves, high-end, black leather, untouched, perfect stitching. "Figured you might need a fresh pair," he said. "Yours are kinda worn." She looked at the gloves, then at her own, cracked, faded, familiar. She smiled faintly. "These work fine," she said softly. "They're broken in." He stared for a moment, then nodded. "Right, yeah, broken in." He left the new gloves on her cot and walked away. When she slipped the old ones back on, the leather hugged her hands like memory. They weren't scars, they were proof. What do you say to someone who's become a legend in a single day? The base was quiet that night, unnervingly quiet. Even the wind, usually so restless up here, had gone still, like the mountains themselves were waiting. Fob Kestrel lay under a sky so clear it looked fragile. The stars burned hard and cold, a million pinpricks of light in the black. Sergeant Anna Sharma stood alone on the perimeter wall, leaning against a sandbagged parapet. Her rifle hung slung across her shoulder, the strap cutting a familiar line across her body. She wasn't on guard duty. She never was. This was something different, a habit, a ritual. Some soldiers smoked after missions. Some drank. Sharma watched horizons. The valley stretched out below, vast, silent, merciless. Somewhere out there, under all that moonlight, lay the plateau. The one where 3 men had died and a legend had been reborn. She didn't smile, she didn't relive it, she just watched. Footsteps broke the quiet, slow, steady, deliberate. She didn't turn. She didn't need to. She already knew who it was. Major Kalen Vance came up beside her, hands clasped behind his back. He didn't speak for a while. He just stood there, staring out at the same darkness she was watching. The two of them, side by side, separated by rank but bound by something deeper now, understanding. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower than she'd ever heard it. Stripped of command, stripped of arrogance. Just a man trying to find the right words. "There was a story," he began, eyes still on the valley, "that used to float around the intel community back when I was at Bragg. A kind of ghost story." He paused, the wind catching his voice. "They said there was a sniper, maybe a woman, maybe a man. No one knew for sure. Code name, Kali." Sharma didn't move. The name hung between them, sharp and fragile. "They said this operator," Vance continued slowly, "worked for a Tier 1 unit that technically didn't exist. Could read the wind like it was a book. Could tell a crosscurrent by the way grass bent a mile away. Could wait for days for one perfect shot." He turned his head slightly, studying her profile against the pale starlight. Her face was calm, unreadable. "They said Kali made a shot in the Hindu Kush that bent around a mountain," he said with a faint, almost disbelieving laugh. "A bullet that curved, impossible, but the story spread. Guys swore they saw the after-action footage before it disappeared into the vault. And then one day Kali just vanished. No record, no rotation home, just gone." He let the silence stretch again. It wasn't awkward. It was respect shaped like quiet. Vance exhaled, slow. "The file I got on you," he said finally, "was perfect. Too perfect. Standard career track, clean paperwork, a couple of generic commendations. It was convincing. Too convincing." He shifted his stance, leaning his elbows on the sandbags. "You know, I used to think I was good at reading people. I could tell the posers from the real deal within a minute. But you," he stopped, shook his head slightly. You fooled me, completely. Sharma said nothing. Her gaze didn't move from the horizon. Vance watched her another moment, then spoke again, quieter now, almost reverent. They say Kali went dark 3 years ago. Some said she was killed in an op that went sideways. Some said she just walked away. He turned to face her fully. So, tell me, Sergeant, which one's true? Sharma's expression didn't change. Her breath came slow and steady, a faint cloud in the freezing air. Her voice, when it came, was soft. Stories don't need truth, sir. They just need to be useful. He blinked, thrown by the answer. What's useful about ghosts? They remind people to look up, she said, to believe that something impossible might still be out there. He studied her for a long moment, and in that stillness he realized she wasn't denying it. She wasn't confirming it either. She didn't need to. The silence was the truth. He turned back to the valley, humbled. The man who had once doubted her now stood beside her in awe. After a long pause, he nodded slowly, almost to himself. You've got a permanent Overwatch slot with my company. You and Riley pick your missions, your gear, your insertion methods. Full autonomy. You answer only to me. She didn't react, didn't thank him, just a faint nod. It wasn't a promotion. It was acknowledgement, a rare kind, the kind that can't be written into a file. Welcome to Razorback Company, Sergeant, Vance said finally. He turned and walked away, his boots echoing softly against the wooden walkway until the sound faded into the low hum of generators. She didn't turn to watch him go. The silence reclaimed the night, and she stood there, alone again, the ghost of a legend reborn into a body that still carried scars. Inside her tent later, the lamplight painted soft gold over steel and shadow. Her rifle lay disassembled again, the parts arranged neatly on her mat. Cleaning wasn't a chore for her. It was meditation, the act of restoring balance after chaos. Each stroke of the cloth across the barrel was measured, precise. Her mind wandered not to the shot, not to the kill, but to the sound before it. The wind, the voice that had guided her through the storm. Outside, footsteps approached, softer this time, hesitant. Permission to enter. Riley's voice came from just beyond the canvas flap. She didn't look up. Come in. He stepped inside, the chill air following him. His uniform still carried dust from the valley, his eyes dark from lack of sleep. But there was something else there now, humility. He watched her for a moment before speaking. You, talk to the major. She nodded once. What'd he say? That we pick our own missions now. He gave a small, incredulous laugh, just like that. Just like that. He scratched the back of his neck, unsure what to say next. Everyone's talking, you know. Half the base thinks you're some classified asset. Other half thinks you're a myth, like a ghost. She paused in her cleaning, her hand resting on the bolt. And what do you think? He thought about it, really thought. I think you saved more than a mission. You saved our reputation, mine especially. He let out a long exhale. I was an ass when you got here, treated you like a rookie, like you didn't belong. Guess I was the one who didn't. She smiled faintly. Everyone belongs somewhere, Corporal. It just takes time to find out where. He nodded, guess so. He started to leave, but stopped at the flap. You ever going to tell me what sufficient for the task really means? She looked up, eyes glinting with the faint light. It means knowing exactly what you can do and not needing anyone to believe it first. He smiled a little at that, a quiet, honest smile, and slipped out into the night. Hours passed. The base slept. Only the distant hum of generators and the rhythmic crunch of boots from the night watch broke the silence. Sharma lay on her cot, staring at the canvas above her. Her mind was quiet, but her heart was. Because the thing about ghosts is, they never really rest. She closed her eyes and the mountains came back. Not the Zaros Valley, another one. Steeper, colder, 3 years ago, snow instead of dust. Another mission, another ridge, Another shot that was supposed to be impossible. And the face of the man she'd lost. Her old spotter, her partner. The memory hit like cold wind, no sound, just feeling. He'd been the only one who knew her real name, the only one who'd called her Kali with a grin instead of fear. They made a perfect pair until the op in the Hindu Kush, until the storm, until the bullet that came from nowhere. She had pulled the trigger that day too, but she hadn't walked away unscathed. That's why she'd disappeared. That's why she'd buried herself behind an ordinary name, a standard file, a broken glove. Because the legend wasn't armor anymore, it was a cage. And tonight it had cracked open again. Her hand drifted over the torn leather glove beside her on the mat. The frayed edge caught a sliver of light. She ran her thumb over it, feeling every crease, every scar, every story stitched into it. People had mocked the gloves because they looked old, imperfect, but perfection was never what saved her. It was wear, it was weight, it was memory. The glove was a map of everything she'd survived. Outside, the first trace of dawn began bleeding into the eastern sky. She rose, slipped the glove back on, and walked to the perimeter wall again. The horizon was turning violet, that fragile hour before sunrise when everything feels both new and ancient. She lifted her eyes to the far ridges. Somewhere out there, the devil's bellows still howled across the stones, carrying the echoes of 3 impossible shots. She stood there until the first light touched her face, her breath fogged in the cold air. And as the sun crested the peaks, casting long, sharp shadows across the valley, she whispered to herself, almost inaudibly, "Sometimes silence is the loudest victory." The wind stirred again, gentle this time, as if answering back. She turned, walking toward the camp, another day, another mission waiting. No ceremony, no fanfare, just the same boots, the same rifle, the same torn gloves. Legends don't need applause. They just need purpose. What happens when a legend starts to doubt herself? The storm had passed, but its echo remained in the mountains, in the way the wind moved through the canyons, in the way the earth seemed to remember thunder. The Zaros Valley lay silent again, scrubbed clean by the violence of the night before. At Forward Operating Base Kestrel, silence had taken on a new kind of weight. When Sergeant Anna Sharma walked across the yard that morning, soldiers who once looked through her now moved out of her way. No salutes, no cheers, just quiet respect, the kind that didn't need words. The same men who'd mocked her gloves now averted their eyes when she passed. Legends don't demand respect, they draw it out of silence. Inside the TOC, Major Vance was already up, sleeves rolled, a mug of stale coffee cooling at his elbow. The map table in front of him was littered with satellite prints and intel sheets. But when he looked up and saw her in the doorway, he straightened unconsciously. "Sergeant Sharma," he said, "come in." Riley followed a step behind her, more at ease than he'd been in days, though the faint shadow of awe hadn't yet left his face. He didn't look like the man who'd mocked her once. He looked like someone who'd stood too close to truth and come back changed. Vance gestured to the table. "New tasking came in overnight. Ghost teams are rotating, but I'm keeping you and Riley on Overwatch priority." "Understood, sir." He pointed at a satellite photo, a road cutting through broken terrain near a village called Mersh. "Intel's shaky, but we've got movement suggesting a weapons convoy pushing through this pass tomorrow night. Light vehicles, civilian cover, maybe 5 or 6 men per truck. If it's what we think it is, they're ferrying parts for manpads out of Zaros before the network collapses." He looked up. "Command wants them stopped, quietly." "Rules of engagement?" Sharma asked. "Observation first. Confirm identity. You only engage if they threaten Allied assets or if the convoy's destination is confirmed hostile." Riley frowned. "And if it's civilians?" Vance's expression hardened. "Then it's not our fight." The silence stretched. Sharma's eyes lingered on the map, on the route that twisted through the hills. Narrow, exposed, perfect for a trap. Her gut turned cold. Something about it felt wrong. Too clean, too quiet. "When do we move?" she asked. "Tonight. You'll be inserted via convoy to Forward Point Delta. From there, it's a 12-hour hike to your position." He paused, studying her face. "You'll have full autonomy on callouts and engagement. You earned that." She nodded once, not out of pride but acknowledgement. Then she and Riley turned and left. Outside, the wind had picked up again, tugging at the canvas tents and whipping dust across the motor pool. "You feel that?" she asked quietly as they walked. "What, the wind?" She shook her head. "No, the silence before something breaks." They left before dusk. The sky was fading from gold to indigo, the kind of light that makes mountains look endless. The base fell away behind them, swallowed by shadow. Their convoy stopped at the base of a ridge, where an old dirt road vanished into rock. From there, it was all on foot. The climb to Forward Point Delta was long, brutal, and wordless. But they didn't need to talk anymore. They'd found a rhythm, her quiet pace, his steady breathing, the unspoken language of trust built in the aftermath of chaos. At midnight they reached the overlook, a natural balcony of stone, narrow and cold. From here, the road below was a pale scar winding through black terrain. Riley unpacked his gear beside her. "Visibility's decent," he murmured, scanning through his scope. "Range to road, 2100. Elevation advantage, 60 meters. If the convoy rolls through here, we'll see it." Sharma nodded. "Check wind." He glanced at his kestrel. 4 to 5 miles per hour, quartering right. She didn't bother with her meter. She could feel it on her cheek, taste it in the air. She settled into prone position, rifle steady, crosshairs slicing through the night. The stars wheeled silently above. Time slowed. Waiting, it was what she did best. It was where legends lived. For hours, the world remained still. Then headlights. Faint at first, distant, crawling up the pass. Riley leaned closer to his spotting scope. Visuals on first vehicle, pickup, covered bed, civilian make, second vehicle trailing 200 meters. He adjusted focus, watching shapes move behind the windshield. Thermal shows 6 heat signatures in the lead truck, 4 armed. Sharma's eye never left the scope. Weapons identifiable. Negative, they're covered. She adjusted her scope a fraction, watching the road bend below. The convoy slowed, braked. The lead truck's door opened. A man stepped out, tall, wearing local garb under a flak vest, a radio on his chest. He looked back at the trucks, gestured once. Something about the movement, too professional, too smooth, made her pulse tighten. "Not villagers," she murmured. "They're trained." Riley's voice was low. Orders were to observe. "I know." The second truck door opened. Another man climbed out, scanning the ridge line with night vision goggles. His weapon hung low but ready. "They're sweeping," Riley whispered. "They know this route's watched." Sharma exhaled slowly. The weight of the rifle felt heavier than usual. She watched as the man turned and saw what he was carrying. A crate, metal, marked with Cyrillic letters. "Manpad component," she said softly. "Confirmed." Riley looked at her. "That's confirmation. We have green light." Her finger rested near the trigger. She lined up the shot, perfect angle, steady target. But something in her gut twisted. Her instincts, the same ones that had saved her life too many times, whispered, "Wait." "Hold fire," she said. "What?" Riley's voice spiked. "You just said it's confirmed." "Something's wrong." He peered again through the scope. "Wrong how?" She didn't answer. She was listening again, not to the wind this time, but to the silence, the shape of the night. There was a rhythm to ambushes. This wasn't it. Then faint, a sound she'd learned to recognize years ago, the soft click of a distant relay. Her blood ran cold. "Down," she hissed. grabbing Riley's shoulder and yanking him flat. The world exploded. A blast tore through the ridge across from them, flame blossoming where the decoy truck had been. The air turned to thunder and dust. A second explosion followed, closer this time, scattering debris across the road. Riley's voice cracked. "What the hell?" "It's bait," she snapped. They weren't delivering, they were waiting. Through the smoke, she saw movement. Dozens of figures flooding from the shadows, insurgents moving up from the ravine. The convoy wasn't carrying weapons. It was the weapon meant to draw Overwatch teams out of hiding. Riley scrambled for the comms unit. "TOC, this is Ghost 2, ambush confirmed. Heavy contact on Marsh Pass." "Static." Sharma's pulse slowed. Time narrowed again like it always did when chaos found her. She pivoted the rifle, scanning for angles. "We're blown, we move." Riley's breathing was ragged. "We can't exfil now, the road's crawling." "I said move." She grabbed her gear, slinging the rifle across her shoulder, her movements calm, practiced. The mountain was alive with fire now, tracer rounds stitching the air, red lines carving chaos into the night. They retreated up the ridge, moving low, silent. Rounds cracked off stone, throwing shards into the air. Riley stumbled, adrenaline making him clumsy. "Why didn't we shoot when we had the chance?" "Because they wanted us to," she said. They reached a shallow depression near the ridge top, barely enough cover. She dropped to prone again, setting up her rifle, scanning. Below, the insurgents were spreading out, their gunfire sporadic but wild. She picked out leaders by their movements, the ones shouting, directing, the ones who mattered. She dialed her scope, one breath, one shot. Crack! The leader dropped. Riley watched through his scope, disbelief returning. "That's 2,000 yards in crosswind." 2,000 is easy," she said quietly. Another figure rose, signaling with a flare. She tracked him, adjusted. Crack! Another body fell. "3 left," Riley whispered. His voice was calmer now. He stopped panicking. He was sinking to her rhythm. Then new sound, a different pitch, whistling fast, mortar. "Down," she shouted, dragging Riley flat as the shell slammed into the ridge below, shaking the earth. Dust poured down from above. Her ears rang, her chest burning. She rolled, checking him, alive, coughing. He blinked through the haze. "They've got us zeroed, we're pinned." Her mind raced. She looked downslope, then at the cliffside behind them. Jagged, steep, she pointed. "That ledge 50 meters down, it's cover." He stared. "That's a fall." "It's a slide," she corrected. "Controlled move." Without hesitation, she hooked her rifle strap over her shoulder and started down. Gravel slipped under her boots, sending small avalanches of rock cascading into the dark. Behind her, Riley followed, breath sharp, muttering a prayer. They landed hard on the ledge below, hearts hammering, lungs clawing for air. Above them, mortars screamed again, but this time the blasts hit empty stone. They were ghosts again. Riley slumped against the rock, laughing weakly. "We're insane." "Maybe," she said, reloading calmly, "but we're alive." He wiped dust from his face, staring at her through the half-light. "You knew, didn't you, that it was a trap?" "I guessed." "And you still went." She looked out over the valley, her eyes distant. "Sometimes you go because it's your job. Sometimes you go to see who's waiting." He frowned, trying to understand. Who was waiting, Anna? She didn't answer. Her gaze stayed locked on the distant horizon. In the faint glow of fires below, she saw shapes moving, disciplined, organized, sweeping through the kill zone. Not insurgents, not locals, too clean, too coordinated. Someone else was out there. When they finally exfiltrated hours later, the first light of dawn had returned to the peaks. The smoke from the valley drifted upward, painting the sky in ash and amber. They made it back to Fob Kestrel just as the sun touched the ridges, exhausted, bruised, silent. Major Vance was waiting on the tarmac, jaw tight, eyes cold. You disobeyed a direct order to hold position, he said. Sharma met his stare evenly. We followed mission intent, sir. We observed, and we survived. His lips twitched, frustration or respect, he couldn't tell. You're walking a thin line, Sergeant. She nodded once. That's where the truth usually is. He didn't answer, he just watched her walk away. Riley lingered, glancing back at the major. Sir, the convoy wasn't what we thought. It was a setup. Someone fed us bad intel. Vance frowned. From where? Riley's voice dropped. Command chain above you. The major's face hardened. He looked past Riley toward Sharma, already disappearing into the rows of tents. For the first time, Vance wondered if Kali hadn't just come back by chance. Maybe she'd been sent. That night, as the sun bled into the peaks, Sharma sat alone, cleaning her rifle again. Her gloves, torn, worn, perfect, lay beside her. Her thoughts were quieter now, heavier. The mountain had spoken again, but this time it hadn't been about skill. It had been about trust, about how truth hides behind orders, about how some wars are fought not in valleys but inside people. She slipped her glove back on and whispered to herself. Sometimes the hardest shot is the one you don't take. The wind outside shifted softly, as if agreeing. How do you fight an enemy wearing your own uniform? The question followed her long after the gunfire stopped. It echoed through the corridors of the base, under the hum of generators, behind every salute and every order barked too quickly. Sergeant Anna Sharma sat at the far end of the briefing tent, staring at the grainy satellite photo projected on the canvas wall. A burnt valley, black scars where trucks used to be, the aftermath of the ambush. To anyone else it looked like success, an enemy convoy destroyed, insurgent casualties high. But to her it looked wrong, too controlled, too convenient. Major Vance stood at the head of the table, the morning light cutting sharp lines across his face. The official report says the operation was a success, he said, voice measured. We've confirmed the targets were enemy combatants. Riley frowned. With respect, sir, we didn't confirm anything. We barely made it out alive. That ambush was a setup. Vance nodded slowly, eyes on Sharma. I agree. That admission hung heavy in the tent. He exhaled. Intel came through Division Command, not from our local assets. The source was tagged as trusted, which means someone in that chain wanted this to happen. Riley looked between them, brow furrowed. You think they were after us? Not you, Sharma said softly. Me. The words stopped them both. Vance turned. You think someone targeting you? Her tone stayed even. Kali disappeared for a reason, sir. People don't like ghosts walking back into the room. He studied her carefully. You think this ties back to whatever you were part of before? I don't think, she said. I know. Vance walked around the table, arms folded. Then you're going to tell me everything, right here, right now. The air tightened. Even Riley's breathing slowed. Sharma didn't move for a long moment. Then, finally, she said it quietly, like confession. There was an operation, 3 years ago, joint command between a classified Tier 1 element and a NATO intelligence task force. Objective was a high-value intercept in the Hindu Kush, an ex-asset selling encryption keys to hostile actors. I was Overwatch. She looked up. We weren't the only team there. Another sniper pair from the task force under different orders. Riley whispered, blue on blue. She nodded once. Miscommunication, they called it later, but the other sniper wasn't aiming by accident. My spotter was killed before we even made the shot. Her eyes darkened, her voice barely a whisper. Afterward, the reports were buried. I went dark. They said Kali was dead. It was safer that way. Vance stared at her, jaw tight. You're saying someone in our own command structure covered it up. I'm saying someone still remembers me, she said, and they don't want me resurfacing. The silence that followed was sharp, heavy. Vance's voice came low. Who? She shook her head. That's what we have to find out. Riley leaned forward, the weight of realization hitting him, and the convoy that was bait. She nodded, to confirm if I was still active. Vance ran a hand down his face. Jesus Christ. He turned toward the tent flap, his silhouette framed in the harsh daylight. You're not writing any report on this. Not a word. Officially, this mission went clean. Riley frowned. Sir, Command's going to ask for details. I'll handle Command, Vance said. You two stay quiet, this doesn't leave this room. Sharma tilted her head slightly. That's not going to stop them. He turned back, voice hard. No, but it might buy us time. The next few days passed in uneasy calm. On the surface, Kestrel ran as usual, patrols, drills, the dull rhythm of war that never truly stops. But beneath it, tension pulsed like a hidden current. People whispered more. Radios went silent faster. Even the wind felt different, sharp-edged, cautious. Vance called her into his office on the third night. The lamplight was dim, his expression worn. I made a few calls, he said quietly. Discreet ones. Check the command logs. You're right, the intel request that triggered your mission didn't come from Division Command. It came from higher, much higher. She waited. Black channel, ghost routing, untraceable signature, but I recognized the initials in the metadata tag. Her jaw tightened. Whose? He hesitated, then said it. Colonel Marin, NATO liaison. Her eyes flicked up sharply. He was part of the Hindu Kush op. Vance nodded. He signed your death certificate. Silence filled the room. Riley, standing near the door, swore under his breath. So that's it. He's tying up loose ends. Vance rubbed his temple. He's got the clearance to move assets without oversight. If he's still hunting you, this doesn't end here. Sharma's gaze was steady. Then we take it to the field. What do you mean? Let him think I'm still running Overwatch missions, she said. Let him send another team after me, but this time I'll be waiting. Vance frowned. You want to draw him out? Her answer was quiet but final. It's the only way this ends. Riley shook his head. That's suicide. She looked at him, calm, resolved. It's balance. The next night, the plan began to take shape. Officially, Ghost 2 was being redeployed for Overwatch training north of Kestrel, a nothing assignment. Off the books, Vance logged it as equipment recalibration. Unofficially, Sharma was setting a trap. She chose the ridge herself, a narrow escarpment overlooking the Tarn River, 3 kilometers from an old NATO outpost now abandoned to time. The kind of place no one noticed until they needed to. They set up at dusk. Riley arranged the optics, comms, and rangefinder. Sharma unpacked her rifle in silence. Every motion was ritual, deliberate, graceful, old muscle memory slipping back into place. Do you really think he'll send someone? Riley asked, adjusting the spotting scope. She didn't look up. He already has. What do you mean? She turned, eyes sharp in the low light. We're not alone. Riley froze. How long? Since the convoy, she said. We've been shadowed. At first it was drones, now it's human. He scanned the dark hills nervously. You're sure? She gave a faint, humorless smile. I know when I'm being watched. He swallowed hard. So we wait. She nodded. We wait. Night fell like ink. The stars came out one by one. The wind whispered through the valley, that same rhythm she always listened for, that quiet code between her and the world. Hours passed, nothing moved. Then movement, a faint shimmer of heat on the far ridge, too steady to be an animal, too cautious to be random. Riley's voice dropped to a whisper. Thermal hit, West Ridge, single shooter, range 2200. Angle. Downhill 15 degrees. Wind steady cross from left. She shifted, aligning her rifle with the distant shimmer. Her heartbeat slowed, her breathing disappeared into stillness. Through her scope, the world condensed into one clean frame, a silhouette against starlight. A sniper. The figure moved like she did, patient, methodical, the way only trained ghosts move. Her finger rested on the trigger, but she didn't fire. She watched. After a long moment she murmured, "He's not local. His rifle's suppressed, Western frame, bolt action." Riley's whisper trembled. "You think it's Marin?" "No," she said. "He wouldn't come himself, but he sent someone who knows how I think." She adjusted the scope. The man was scanning, searching for her position, but hesitating just slightly, like he was remembering an old dance. Recognition hit her like cold water. She knew that movement, that rhythm. "Riley," she said softly, "he's ex-task force." Riley blinked. "One of yours?" She nodded, voice distant. "He used to be." The figure shifted again. A small glint caught the moonlight, a medallion on his harness. Her pulse froze. She remembered that medallion, a unit coin, the one her old spotter used to carry, the same kind she'd buried with him. The shooter wasn't just someone from her past. He was a ghost she'd thought she'd buried. "Name was Cole," she whispered. "He was my spotter's replacement after the Kush op. They told me he died 6 months later." Riley stared. Guess they lied. The standoff stretched into eternity. Two sharpshooters watching each other across a gulf of darkness and memory. Then through the faint static of the headset, a voice broke the silence. Deep, calm, unmistakable. "Kali," it said. Her blood turned to ice. She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years. Riley's head jerked toward her. "He's on comms." She didn't answer. The voice continued, low and deliberate. "Did you really think disappearing would save you? Marin's been watching since the moment you came back online." Her throat tightened. "You sold us out." "No," Cole said. "I survived. There's a difference." "You shot your own," she said, voice breaking through restraint. "You killed my partner." Silence. Then, "Orders, Kali, just following orders, same as you." She closed her eyes for a second, steadying her breath. "Not anymore." She exhaled, slow, measured, and pulled the trigger. The shot echoed across the valley like thunder rolling through time. When the dust settled, the west ridge was empty. No movement, no sound, just smoke curling through the cold. Riley's voice was soft. "Is it over?" Her eyes stayed on the scope. "No," she said, "it's begun." Back at Kestrel, Vance was waiting when they returned. He saw their faces and didn't ask. He just nodded, a small, wordless acknowledgement that he understood more than he'd ever say. Later in the dark, he sat alone in his office, staring at the secure line on his desk. The call log from Division Command still glowed faintly. One line stood out, an encrypted ping from NATO HQ. "Sender C. Marin. Status active. Directive, Asset-Kali, eliminate or contain." He closed the laptop, slowly, quietly. In the reflection of the dark screen, his face looked older, harder. And for the first time, he wasn't sure who the enemy really was anymore. That night Anna cleaned her rifle again. Ritual, meditation, survival. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, from something older, guilt, memory. When she looked down, she saw the torn gloves, the same ones. They weren't just old leather anymore. They were the only piece of her that was still real. She slid one on, whispering to herself, words so soft only the wind heard. "You can't kill a ghost. You can only remind it why it lived." What does a ghost do when the living start to hunt her? For Anna Sharma, the answer came quietly, not as an order, not as an alarm, but as silence. The kind that fills a tent before dawn. The kind that follows betrayal. When she woke that morning, the base felt different. Too calm, too careful. The usual hum of generators was distant, muffled. The soldiers moving through the compound didn't look at her anymore, they looked past her. Something had shifted. She dressed slowly, movements mechanical. Her rifle case stood by her cot, sealed and clean. The torn glove sat folded beside it. She stared at them for a long moment before slipping them on. The leather hugged her palms, soft and cold, familiar. When she stepped outside, the light was thin, early morning gray, stretched thin across the valley. The air carried that stillness soldiers learned to fear, the kind that meant something unseen was already in motion. At the command tent, 2 MPs stood by the entrance. Their eyes followed her as she approached, not hostile, not friendly, just aware. Major Vance was inside. He looked like he hadn't slept. The room smelled like coffee gone cold. His laptop was closed, hands folded in front of it. That never happened. "Morning, Sergeant," he said. His tone was neutral, too neutral. "Sir," she replied. He studied her face for a long beat, as if trying to memorize it. Then he said quietly, "Command sent a recall. Divisions pulling you off active Overwatch rotation." Her jaw tightened. "Reason?" "Pending debrief," he said. "They said it's standard, but I've seen enough standard to know better." Riley shifted in the corner of the tent. He was there too, silent, uncomfortable. His hands fidgeted with the strap of his pack. "They're sending a transport from HQ," Vance continued. "1 hour. Sharma's eyes flicked to the map pinned behind him. Every route, every outpost, every access road. She could already see the trap forming. "They're not sending a transport, sir," she said softly. "They're sending containment." Riley blinked. "Containment." Her voice didn't waver. "They're coming to erase a problem." Vance exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "I thought about that. I also thought maybe I'm being paranoid, but if you're right." "I am," she said simply. He looked at her for a long time, the weight of command written in the lines of his face. Then he turned to Riley. "You didn't hear any of this. If they question you, you say we were discussing mission reports." "Sir." "That's in order, Corporal." Riley's jaw tightened. He nodded. Vance turned back to her. "If you're going to disappear again, now's the time." Her eyes softened just slightly. "And if I leave, they'll come for you next." He gave a tired smile. "I've been in this long enough to know how to survive the politics. You, not so much." "I'm not running," she said quietly. "Not this time." He sighed. "I figured you'd say that." From outside, the low drone of a helicopter began to build, faint but unmistakable. She looked toward the canvas wall, toward the sound. "They're early." Vance stood. "Then we need to move." They slipped out the back of the tent, ducking through rows of stacked crates and parked vehicles. The base was waking up, but no one noticed them, not yet. The helicopter grew louder, circling once before descending toward the main pad. Its rotors sent dust and debris swirling into the air, cloaking everything in haze. Riley ran beside her, breath shallow. "You got a plan?" "Always," she said. They cut toward the maintenance bay, a long, low building near the perimeter fence. Inside, the lights flickered, half the fixtures dead. The air smelled of oil and metal. She grabbed a crate from the corner, flipping it open. Inside, spare uniforms, base tools, and a few unused ID tags. She tossed one to Riley. "Put that on, you're a mechanic now." He stared at the tag. "And you?" She zipped up an olive coverall, tucking her gloves inside. "Same." Outside, the chopper landed. Shadows moved, silhouettes of men in full gear stepping out. Their uniforms were NATO issue, but their movements weren't standard. Too quiet, too precise. "Operators." "Those aren't MPs," Riley muttered. "No," she said, "they're here for me." Through a crack in the hangar door, she watched them spread across the yard, formation tight, weapons unslung but angled low. The kind of posture meant for capture, not combat. She could almost predict their next moves: perimeter lock, visual confirmation, sweep pattern clockwise. Textbook, efficient. Her pulse stayed steady. "They'll start at the command tent. We have 5 minutes." Riley hesitated. "We can't just vanish, Anna. They'll chase." "They already are." He looked at her, really looked. The The calm in her eyes wasn't fear, it was acceptance. "Why not just let Vance explain?" he said. "He can talk them down." She shook her head. "They're not here to listen, they're here to erase a file." By the time the sweep reached the hangar, they were already gone. Vance stalled them at the command tent, questioning, feigning confusion, demanding identification. But the men didn't bite. They'd read their briefing. Their orders didn't include questions. By the time they checked the motor pool, 2 dirt bikes were missing. 1 mechanic and 1 sniper unaccounted for. They followed the tire tracks out into the hills. The mountains swallowed them fast. Riley's bike roared behind her, engine echoing off the stone. The morning light climbed over the ridges, cutting long gold lines across the landscape. Wind tore past her face. The cold bit at her throat. For a few minutes, she could almost believe they were free. Just motion and silence and the rhythm of survival. But the freedom was an illusion, because ghosts can't outrun the living. Riley's voice crackled in her earpiece. "They're tracking us. I can see the birds circling back." "Expected," she said. "You got a destination." "North Ridge. There's a relay tower. If we can reach it, we can transmit the metadata Vance found." He frowned. "To who?" She didn't answer. He pressed, "Anna, who are you sending it to?" She finally spoke, voice tight. "Someone who still believes in truth." The relay tower stood like a skeleton against the sky, tall, rusted, half-broken. They reached it by noon, ditching the bikes beneath an outcrop. The silence here was absolute. Inside the structure, dust and old static filled the air. Sharma moved fast, setting up the field transmitter, connecting power leads to a portable rig she'd pulled from her pack. Riley stood watch at the door. "You really think this is going to work?" he asked. "It'll send," she said. "After that, I don't care." She loaded a data drive into the port, the one Vance had given her, the one he said to keep off the record. The file glowed on the small screen. Hindu Kush Op 0416 Class DAT. Riley leaned closer. "That's the original operation file. The one they buried." He swallowed. "This could ruin careers." "It could save lives," she said quietly. Before she could hit transmit, a sound cut through the static, a faint, rhythmic thump. "Helicopter." Riley froze. "They found us." She looked up, eyes narrowing. "Keep your head down." The tower shuddered as rounds struck the ground nearby. Dust cascaded from the rafters. The chopper's searchlight sliced across the rocks like a blade. Riley shouted over the roar, "We can't stay here." She yanked the transmitter cables free, slamming the drive back into her pack. "We move." They scrambled out the back of the tower, sprinting into the canyon beyond. The wind howled through the rocks, drowning out the rotor's echo. "Cover the ridge," she shouted. "We'll lose them in the folds." Riley followed, heart hammering, lungs burning. Every step was chaos, dust, wind, echo, memory. When they reached the far side of the canyon, she ducked behind a boulder and drew her rifle. "Keep moving." He turned. "What are you doing?" "Covering you." He hesitated. "No, not again." She looked at him, really looked. There was something in her eyes now, something final. "Go, Riley. That file needs to reach someone who still cares." He shook his head. "I'm not leaving you." "You have to." The helicopter's searchlight cut across them again. She exhaled once, slow, steady. Her rifle rose to her shoulder. "Trust me," she said softly. He stared for one more heartbeat, then nodded and ran. The chopper closed in. Her heartbeat slowed, world narrowing to sound and movement. The pilot banked low, scanning for heat signatures. She watched the angle, the light, the wind. Every calculation was instinct, every breath a choice. One shot. The bullet tore through the air and found the helicopter's tail. Boom. The machine spun, dipping hard before regaining control, smoking, limping, retreating. For a moment, the mountain was silent again. Then a second chopper appeared on the horizon. She exhaled. "This never ends," she murmured. Hours later, Riley reached a small village near the old NATO line. The people there didn't ask questions. They never did. He found an old comms terminal, hooked up the drive, and uploaded the file through an encrypted relay. The transmission light blinked once, twice, then steady green. He stared at it for a long time. Then slowly he whispered, "It's done." He looked back toward the mountains, toward the place he'd left her. Nothing moved there, just the wind and the memory of gunfire carried through stone. Back at Fob Kestrel, night had fallen. Major Vance sat alone in his tent, reading a single-line transmission on his secure console. It came from an anonymous source. No header, no trace, just a message. "File released, truth is free, see." He closed his eyes, leaning back in his chair. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the canvas. Somewhere out there, he knew she was still alive, because ghosts don't die. They fade until they're needed again. He whispered to the empty room, "Good hunting, Sergeant." Far from Kestrel, Anna Sharma walked alone across the ridge line, rifle slung, gloves torn and dark with dust. The sky above her was black velvet scattered with stars. Each one burned like memory. She stopped, looking down at the valley below, the same one she once watched through a scope, the same one that had tried to bury her. She took off one glove, feeling the cold against her skin. Her hand trembled slightly, but she smiled, small, real. "Sometimes," she whispered to the wind, "to find the truth, you have to lose everything else." The wind carried her words into the dark, and for a moment the mountains seemed to listen. What happens to a soldier when the mission is finally over? But the war inside never ends. The transmission went out just before dawn. It spread faster than anyone expected. Within 12 hours, encrypted networks across 3 commands lit up with the same file. Hindu Kush Op 0416, DCLSSIFID. Someone had pulled the veil off a wound the world had chosen to forget. An op gone wrong. Friendly fire. A sniper team erased by bureaucracy and ambition. And one survivor who had refused to die quietly. The story hit like a shockwave. Names were redacted, of course, but the message beneath the words was clear enough. Truth doesn't vanish, it just waits for someone brave enough to release it. In a gray conference room somewhere in Brussels, Colonel Marin sat at the head of a table, his jaw locked tight as the file played across the monitor. Every shot, every coordinate, every comm log. Evidence. Unforgiving and precise. The officers around him watched in silence. No one spoke. When it ended, he leaned back in his chair and said quietly, "She's alive." One of the aides shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, command," asking how you want to proceed. He rubbed his eyes, weary, angry. "We proceed the same way we always do. We deny everything." But even he knew denial wouldn't work this time. Because truth, once unburied, becomes its own weapon. Far away, in the mountains where it had all begun, Anna Sharma was watching the sunrise. The peaks were pale gold, the wind was still. Her rifle lay across her lap, cleaned and silent. Next to it, a small transmitter blinked faintly, its battery dying, its purpose fulfilled. She looked tired, not from running, from carrying too much for too long. The gloves on her hands were darker now, dirt, soot, blood, memory, but they still fit perfectly. Behind her, footsteps approached. She didn't turn. "I thought you'd find me sooner," she said. Major Vance stepped into view, hood up, face weathered. He looked older somehow, like a man who'd spent too long looking for something he didn't understand. "I had to make it look like I wasn't looking," he said quietly. She smiled just barely. "You always were good at politics." He chuckled dryly, "And you always hated them." They stood there for a long moment, just 2 soldiers sharing silence. No ranks, No chain of command, just truth. Riley made it, Vance said. He's in Ramstein, the files confirmed authentic, commands scrambling to contain it, but they can't. I know, she said softly. That's why I sent it. Vance exhaled, watching her profile against the morning light. You realize they'll never stop looking for you. They can't find a ghost, she said. He studied her for a moment, then said quietly, You could come back with me, debrief, face it head on. She shook her head. And give them what they want. No, I've given enough. He looked down at her gloves, the torn edges, the years worn into the leather. Those should be in a museum someday. They already are, she said, eyes distant. Just not the kind people visit. The wind picked up. A hawk cut through the air above them, a dark shape gliding on invisible currents. Vance's radio crackled. A distant voice garbled urgent. Major, we've got movement east of your position. He clicked it off. They found you, he said. She nodded. They always do. He took a step closer. Then let me help, we can get you out. Her eyes met his, calm, certain. No, sir, you need to go. He hesitated. Anna. Go, she said again. That's an order. He almost smiled at that, a sad, knowing smile. Then he reached into his pocket and placed something beside her on the rock. Her unit coin, the one she'd left behind years ago. I found it in the old archives, he said. Figured it belonged to you. She looked at it for a moment, then whispered, It belongs to all of them. He nodded once, the kind of nod soldiers give when words are useless, and turned back toward the ridge. Good hunting, he said. Safe travels, she replied. He disappeared into the morning haze. And for a while she just sat there, watching the sun climb higher. By midday, the helicopters came. Not one this time, 3. High altitude, no insignia, no transponder. She heard them long before she saw them. The deep, rolling thrum that rattled bone. She didn't reach for her rifle. She didn't run. Instead, she opened the small, leather-bound notebook beside her. The one with grease-stained pages filled with numbers, wind calls, coordinates, fragments of memory. And she wrote one last entry. Not a report. Not a confession. A message. For whoever finds this, you will be told that ghosts are dangerous. That silence means guilt. That obedience means honor. But you must choose for yourself what truth feels like. Remember, the hardest targets are never on a map. Sometimes they wear a uniform. Sometimes they wear your face. She closed the book and placed it beside the coin. Then she looked at her gloves, cracked, weathered, unbreakable. She smiled faintly, sufficient for the task. Then she rose. The first helicopter crested the ridge. Soldiers rappelled down, fanning out in formation. Voices shouted through the wind. Sergeant Sharma, you are ordered to stand down. She raised her head slowly, hair whipping in the downdraft. Dust and light swirled around her like fire. Her voice, when it came, was steady. Tell your colonel. She paused. The wind remembers. They hesitated just long enough for her to turn, walk toward the cliff's edge, and vanish into the light. The last thing they saw was her silhouette against the sun, unarmed, unafraid. Then she was gone. 3 days later, search teams found nothing. No body. No rifle. Only the notebook, the coin, and the gloves. The gloves looked almost alive in the morning light, torn, scarred, folded neatly together. A pair of hands without a soldier. The report classified the incident as missing, presumed KIA. But every operator who read it knew better. Kali didn't die. She disappeared again. As ghosts do. Months passed, the world moved on. The war shifted somewhere else, as wars always do. In a small cafe in Italy, a woman with dark hair sat by the window, hands wrapped around a chipped mug. Her clothes were plain, her eyes calm. A scar crossed one knuckle, faint but familiar. Outside, a television played muted footage. A news anchor talking about leaked NATO files, internal investigations, resignations. No one in the cafe paid attention. Except her. She smiled softly, not victory, not vengeance, something quieter. Peace. A child outside laughed as a gust of wind blew through the square, knocking over a stack of newspapers. She reached out, catching one as it fluttered against the glass. The headline read, "Truth Exposed, Hidden Ops Uncovered." She folded it once, set it aside, and took another sip of coffee. When she rose to leave, she left two things on the table: her payment and a small, weathered coin. The waiter picked it up, frowning at the strange engraving on its surface. A hawk over crossed rifles. No unit name, no number, just a single word stamped faintly beneath the symbol. Kali. Back in the mountains, winter came early. The wind howled through the valleys where she'd once lain prone for hours, reading its language. Snow covered everything: the rocks, the towers, the scars of war. But if you stood still enough, listened close enough, you could almost hear something in the storm. Not words, not sound. A rhythm. The rhythm of breath and stillness. Of wind over steel. Of a legend refusing to die. And if you followed that rhythm, if you believed in things you couldn't see, you might swear that sometimes, when the snow falls just right, a single rifle shot echoes once across the valley. Soft. Precise. Final. Narrator's closing, voiceover. Some legends are born from glory. Others from guilt. But the rarest kind, the ones that matter, are born from silence. They don't shout. They don't write their names in blood or brass. They just endure. Waiting for the day the wind needs a voice again. The camera would linger on the gloves, now half buried in snow, the leather still visible through the frost. And then slowly, the screen would fade to black. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.